So we're continuing our lecture on creating custom tabs. All right. So this is part 3 of the series where we're going to continue from where we left off in customizing our accumulated depreciation workbook. Now, to recap, what we did was we talked about creating custom groups, and then within that custom group, we created fields. So these fields will allow a user to enter in values and within a form, basically, on a ribbon. So we're going to dive in a little bit more deeper by talking about what is VBA and how to view the VBA script editor, as well as talk about some parts of VBA like option explicit, what are types, variables, and then we're going to talk about a particular function that we're going to create called on a net. Okay, so VBA basically allows a user to automate Microsoft applications. So normally a user can record their actions and then play it back where it'll basically perform the same operations that you recorded. Now, with a little bit more practice, you can customize it to something a little bit more customizable that it can do certain other operations that you might want. Now, you could view your VBA script by hitting Alt F11 on your keyboard. But another way is I can also display it by going on to my developer tab, which I'll show you how to get to in a moment. So let's talk about option explicit. So this keyword, and that's what it is, keywords, allow a user to basically ensure that their variables are spelled correctly. And this is important because if you're writing like 100 lines of code and there's different variations to how you spell your variable, it may not store the values that you want throughout the code, and then you might have an issue. So without those keywords, you have to go right through the code and figure out where the error was versus if it was on top of the script and you run it, the error will appear right there. Like, okay, we don't know what that keyword is. We don't know what that variable is. Okay, that's a nice way of debugging it so that you can find that particular syntax error. Okay, so it can be activated manually or automatically, and we're going to talk about that. Okay, and like I said, you only need it once, and it's a great way of figuring out if you have any typing errors, especially with variables. Okay, so how do you activate it automatically? Well, on your Visual Basic editor, you go into Options, as displayed here. The Options dialog box will appear. You check off Require Variable Declaration, and you hit OK. And when you create a new module, Option Explicit will appear right there on top of your code automatically. Okay? Or you just type it in, Option Explicit. That's the manual way of doing it. Either way works. So let's talk about an example. Let's say that I have a variable called myText. It stores a string. Now, we're going to do two things. We're going to do two examples, one without option explicit, one with option explicit. Okay, so we're going to see what happens. And basically, the scenario is if I mistype it, because initially it's going to be typed lowercase m, y, capital T, E, X, T. That's the variable name. The misspelling is going to be capital M, lowercase y, capital T, X, T. So you see the variation? It's a misspelling, but you're going to see it in effect. Okay. All right. So with that said, let's take a look. So here I've created a two modules. One called mod no option expression explicit. I'm sorry. The other one mod option explicit. So one has it, one doesn't. So this one doesn't have option explicit on the top. What will happen? So I'm going to run this. Okay. So if I hit this or F5, we got nothing. What should have happened was should have had punnet. Okay. We didn't get that. Okay. So there was no way to vet that, and we got an empty box. Now let's see what happens when we have option explicit here. And if we run the code, we get an error message because it doesn't recognize capital M, Y, capital T, X, T. That variable has not been declared, which leads us to the next thing. How do you declare a variable? Okay. All right. So I'm going to hit OK on that and get this, and I'm going to stop it. So how do you declare a variable? There's a couple ways. When you're in a function, you do dim, the variable name, and then you can put as whatever it is. So it could be a text. I'm going to hit this a couple times. And then after as, you hit space. And then you see that this IntelliSense gives you a couple options. So it can be as anything according to your specifications. So it can be several different types depending on what your code is doing. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to put string because that's what I need to store. Okay. So this has to be declared. So if I declared it, for instance, and I said M, capital M, lowercase y, txt, I said as string, I run it again, I got no error message, but I also have no value because nothing has been set for it. Now, I can also set a value by doing this, semicolon, and I can put capital M, txt equals testing, for instance, and I hit F5, and you got testing. Okay. And that, my friends, is how you declare a variable, or at least one way. There are several other ways. Okay. But this is the very basic way. All right. Back to the demonstration. Now, type. This is a user-defined way of storing your data. Basically, you're using elements or fields. Okay, so the syntax for it is it could be private, it could be public, but the keyword is going to be type and then the type name. So the type name could be like special type, okay? And then it could have certain elements like think of it like an object, like a let's do a cat, all right? So you might have a type cat. Uh, Cat could have uh, a fur name, or they they might have like um, yeah, I apologize. I'm just trying to think of something on the fly. Because it's like an object. So let's do it. Let's do a person. Okay. So with a person, you might have their height, weight, age, hair color, so forth. So the demographic information, and those are your elements. Okay. So the variable name might be person, and then like I said, you got your height, your weight, and everything like that, and those are your elements. So we're going to kind of get into it a little bit so that we can kind of see this in action. So I've put this on my Patreon page. It's for free. What you do is you're going to go in and look for accumulated depreciation 5.11.0 demo 7. The extension is a little bit different. So normally it's an XSLX. This time it's an M. M stands for macro. So this is going to be a macro enabled workbook. All right. So we're going to open this up in Excel. Bada bing. All right. So looks like I promised you, we're going to do a little bit of prep work. So let's talk about how to enable the developer tab on your workbook. All right. So with your Excel workbook open, what you do is you go into File, you go into Options. All right. Now you have this open. Now you need to customize your ribbon. All right. Now we have the customize ribbon option open. On your right side, you check off developer. Okay, mine is already checked off. By doing that, you will basically have the option to open up your VB script, among other things. Okay, we're going to hit OK. And then right up here, you have the developer, and then you just click Visual Basic, which opens that up. Okay, F11 will do the same thing. All right, so we talked about that. We need to display the immediate window and dock it to the bottom. Okay, that's only if needed. And then we're going to activate option explicit in VBA. So let's do that. Okay, so we'll need the Visual Basic Editor activated. And we're talking about this window right here. So let's say that it's gone. We don't have it. Okay, we need to view it. So we go to View. We go to Immediate Window. Now you see it's floating. So we dock it. So what I'm doing is I'm just pointing to it right here. You see what's going on? Okay, what you're trying to do is you're trying to dock it to the bottom. So I'm dragging it right down there so that it could dock right to the bottom screen. This is very important because it helps in terms of debugging your code. Now, we want this automatically populated, the option explicit. Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration first. Let's say I created a new module. Okay, we have this activated already, right? To do that, you go to Tools, Options, you check this off, Require Variable Declaration, and hit OK. And this will appear automatically. All right. So So what you're going to do now is you're going to create a module called mod cust rib. Okay, so we're going to create that. And I'm going to show you how. Okay, so let me do this first, because what's the fun in that if it's already created for you? What you do is you go up here to this little icon, or you can right click, and then you can go to insert and then module. Either way works. They both work the same. This is your properties window. So you go to name and you change it to mod cust rib. And there it goes. And you notice that the name is also affected here. Okay. So we get that. Okay. Moving right along. All right. So we're going to do a couple other things. So in our next exercise, we're going to create a accumulated depreciation entry type. And within that type, we'll have the accumulated depreciation date. So it's just like the entry date, it could be today's date mostly. We have the accumulated depreciation month. Basically, we might be recording it for December 2023, which leads us to the depreciation month year. Could be the term, and it's usually the next term within the list. And then we're talking about the payment that we're paying out for the depreciation. And I've also added a screenshot basically kind of going over uh, what's on the ribbon so that you can follow along a little easier as well. Okay? So you'll need to type that in. Now we're going to clear a couple variables. So you have what's called a ribbon. I basically called it rib. This is going to be a iRibbon UI. So that's going to be the ribbon that's on your Excel. You now will also need a reference to the accumulated depreciation entry type. So the one that you just created is going to be called entry. You're going to have a reference to your workbook. We call it WB. One to your worksheet. And the worksheet we're talking about is the accumulated depreciation worksheet. We are going to call it WS. And we're going to also create a reference to your list object, and we're going to call it LO. LO. Okay? So everything is typed over here. All right. And then we're moving right along. We're going to create a function. So we started off with the keyword function, and then the function name. So on init, open parentheses, and then we're going to follow it by ref, so by reference, and we're referencing a particular ribbon. So in this case, what we're doing is saying we're going to have the reference to the Excel ribbon, and we're going to set it with our global variable rib. So we're passing that along. And then we end it with end function. Okay? So now we're going to kind of get into the meat of it and add some stuff in between that. But first, create the starting function. So we're going to have the basically the start and end function right there. Now, within that function, as I've said before, you're going to basically set the global variable ribbon with what we just passed. So the reference to that particular ribbon. Okay, we need that because we need to be able to reference it so that we could grab basically things from the accumulated depreciation group that we created. Okay, so we need a reference to the ribbon. So we use set rib equal to rib underscore. Next, we're going to basically set the workbook. So WB is going to be set to this workbook. So when we say this workbook, it's the active workbook that we're using right now. And you need that keyword, this workbook. Now, we need a reference to the worksheet. Two ways of doing that. Now, the easiest way is to grab it by its index. Now, that can be done any number of ways. So if you have like an index based on, let's say you have like a lot of worksheets and things like that, right? You can index it based on its order. So in this case, we just have worksheet one, and it always goes from one to however many worksheets there are on the workbook. Or you can reference it by its name, which is the easiest and more certain way of accessing that particular worksheet. So it could be like set WS equal to WB, which is the workbook, this workbook, and then you say dot worksheets and then the worksheet name. The second option is the best option. Roll works about the same way. So you can have a lot of list objects within your workbook. Or if you've named it, you can reference its name. Now, I'm going to take this opportunity to go over how do you name your list object. So we have the Excel workbook open. I'm going to zoom in a bit. And I'm going to go to the list object, which is right here. If I click in it, and if I go to the design, because every time you click in it, you have an option to design it. Now within the design, you can go right over here to the table name, and then you can always change it. So the table name can be whatever you want. In this case, I've named it TBL, capital SCH, depreciation. So scheduled depreciation. And that's just my naming convention. You can name it just about whatever you want, but once again, there are certain conditions that you have to follow. So you can't have like a number, or it can't start with certain special characters. Anyway, I just wanted to take time to mention that little public service announcement. All right, so we continue on. Now, after you set up the list object, the uh, worksheet, the workbook, we're going to basically set the basically the field values. And basically, let's do this so that we can kind of see that in real time. Oh, that's all right. Well, I can show you in another demonstration. So what we're doing is we're kind of doing default values within the ribbon. So the entry depreciation date is going to be today's date. Okay. And we're also going to see if we can grab a couple other things as well. So we're looking at defaulting it to the current month. So in this case, we're grabbing like the month name from whatever now is, and now is basically saying today's date. So it's taking today's date and it's going to grab the month, which is basically 1 through 12, and then based on that number, you're going to get the month name. So January spelled out, February spelled out, and so forth. And then the second option, true, is just saying you want to abbreviate it. False is just saying don't abbreviate it. We want it all spelled out. Okay. Okay. And then these are some other defaults. So depreciation year. So we're getting the year value of now. Looks like we're also grabbing something that we're going to evaluate, which is the max. So we have the list object, and then we're going to get uh, the next highest term within the list, and then that's going to be within term, just as a default. And then we are going to grab the payment, which is stored on your workbook. So there's a reference to it called, looks like monthly depreciation payment. Okay. So like I said, there's a lot going on here, but I just kind of want to go over some of the things, but you want to kind of type that in so that we're all on the same page. And if you have any questions, please comment, and then I'll be sure to answer them. And then finally, we're going to validate that based on the depreciation date. And once again, the depreciation date is going to be today's date. So that's all that's doing. All right. Now, we are going to need to do one other thing. So what you'll do is you'll save what you have in Excel, and then you're going to go into the UI editor and open that up. On the top line, you're going to have the custom UI. So what you're doing is going to add in this thing called onload, and then the name of the function that you created, which is on init. So basically what it's saying is when your Excel object opens or workbook opens, it's going to perform whatever is on init, which in this case is loading up the workbook, loading up the ribbon, setting up the defaults, and then you'll be able to continue on from there. That's very important. If that's not on your custom UI, it will not load. So it needs that. All right. So I'm leaving everything up to you. Once again, this is on my Patreon page, so you want to download that, try it out yourself, and we are going to continue on. So our next lesson is going to be the continuation of that, and it's going to get a lot tougher than that, but we'll try to get through it as easy as possible. But again, any questions, please feel free to comment, and I'll be sure to answer them. Thank you. And if you want to follow me on Patreon, also I'm on X, Twitter, or whatever. You can also purchase things on our Teespring store. We would definitely appreciate support. Okay, like, comment, share, and I'll see you next time.